Welcome back to the Peggy Smedley Show, the voice of M2M and connected devices.
Welcome back. This is the Peggy Smedley Show. We are coming to you live from CES 2019 in Las Vegas, and it is exciting. Right now, I am with Scott Ford. He is the CEO of Pepper IoT. Scott, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Peggy. I appreciate you having me.
So, Scott, I have been excited to have you on the show. We have been trying to get us coordinated to have a time, and it took us all the way to Las Vegas to get us together, so I'm excited for that.
Yeah, the perfect place for it.
I'm telling you, it is crazy, right? I mean,
yeah, it sure is.
How did you make it through the crowds to get over here to the North Tower here?
Well, I've come to CES the last dozen years or so, and the last few shows, we just stayed in our hotel suite and didn't come to the show. And I remembered why when I tried to navigate my way here. It's just a madhouse, but there's some really cool stuff out there. So it's if you get the chance to walk around, it's really exciting.
It's exciting. Every year, I always say when I come to CES, what amazes me is how big the booths get. Some are always big, some get even bigger. But this year I'm excited because how many are really finally talking about IoT. But you and I were talking about, we had a conversation prior to the show on the phone to really engage in what's happening with the IoT. And everybody's trying to talk about this is the perfect year for IoT. IoT is finally come into its own. But we can't escape the fact it might come into its own, but we've got some really big hurdles to overcome, and that's where you guys come in. So for our listeners and viewers today, really talk about what is Pepper IoT, because I always chuckle about the name of Pepper IoT, because what does that really mean to people? Because your focus really is trying to help people understand the security side of things. And I think there's a lot, I think when people are out there and they're looking at all these crazy new products, they forget you hook up a lot of things. There's a lot of bad guys out there still. No matter what we do, we love it, but we've got to be diligent and aware of everything behind the scenes.
Yeah, no question. Well, let me begin to describe our business at Pepper by unpacking the IoT space for a second. IoT represents a whole big, sort of new marketplace that spans industrial IoT, enterprise IoT, and consumer IoT. So Pepper operates squarely in the consumer side of IoT. So what Pepper is a platform as a service. We work with consumer electronics manufacturers and service providers to create compelling, high utility, engaging IoT services for consumers of single devices or consumers of networked home automation, home security services. So our platform is end-to-end. We call it a full stack approach, where we address the device with our own software on the firmware itself, and then take that communication all the way through a cloud infrastructure to the end user through what we call our user operating system. And so by doing that, we're able to deliver safe, secure, highly private services to end users. So I mentioned before, IoT is this big, definition of a lot of things. Even within the consumer space, there's just a lot to talk about. So think of Pepper as what Nest created to operate its devices, its thermostats, its cameras, but we're independent and multi-tenant. So we're for the company who doesn't want to spend $10 million on a sophisticated cloud and software infrastructure. They use ours, and they're able to leverage all of the capabilities inside of our platform to be able to go to market very quickly on a low investment basis and deliver these services.
But let's talk about that, because when we talk about what you guys do, which is very important, we don't have the governance from product to product to product. And even though you want to provide this platform, you have to then say, how do you regulate the products that are brought to market on what you're bringing? Because there's no way from layer to layer that those products are doing what they say that they're doing. Isn't that what we're talking about? Because as consumers, no offense to all of us consumers, we're a bit naive when we buy a product thinking that product's secure. We just heard just recently again the baby monitor story of the woman saying, somebody was creeping in on her baby, right? I mean, that's a product that's dear and near to all of our hearts when we have children, and we fear for the safety of our children.
security and privacy and consumer IoT is a hot mess right now. I mean, and it's
a hot mess. There you
hot
just
mess.
said a
It's-
hot mess.
it's
That's
not-
frightening to say a hot mess.
Well, and it's not getting better.
And there's millions being spent, and we're talking about it right here on the show floor. Millions.
Yeah, it's crazy. So you walk into any mass market retailer today, you look at their shelves where they're carrying IoT devices. You'll see some percentage of them that are big brands that Nest and Ring and others. You got to be confident to buy those. I mean, those are American companies doing the thing to keep their customers. They're worried about their reputation. They want to protect end users. So those are absolutely fine. But there's, call it 75 or 80% of the devices that are on the shelf space today that you have no idea. So there's two issues. The first issue, and I think this is intuitive to most people, is that the device itself has to be secure, meaning that there has to be practices to protect the communications from the device, and avoid breaches or hackers to come in and penetrate the device. So that's the sort of common thinking around how to secure IoT is start with the device and make sure that that device is secure. And that's absolutely important. What people don't think about, though, is it's a communications platform, which is more than half the product, right? You have a device that's effectively this fairly dumb thing with radios on it and potentially video in it. The magic really comes when you take those functions from that device into a communications platform and then process that and deliver it to the end user. So what's happening in the market right now, and the retailers don't know enough about the technology to understand how to due diligence the products they're taking, but offshore foreign platforms are serving as the communication providers for these IoT communications devices. So if you walk into a store and buy an off-brand device, chances are once you pair that device to your Wi-Fi network, both that device and the app that you download to control that device immediately communicate back to China or some other foreign market.
So they're listening. We're already worried that Alexa's listening. We don't know who the heck's listening to us, is what you're saying.
I'd rather have Alexa listen to me than some, sort of
foreign
transmission
entity
to a potential enemy state, right?
So, but when we look at these products, are we now creating this fear and more fear of Big Brother? I mean, is that what we're saying? So are we saying the government, the United States, because most people don't want more regulation. So are we now, you and I are just talking about this, and are we encouraging the government has to regulate all of these products that are brought in from other countries? Is that what you're encouraging?
I can't believe I'm saying this, but yes. Right, the last thing I want as a manager of a startup
Nobody's doing business with you right
now is regulation, but it's frankly necessary. So the analogy I like to use is think about your cell phone, right? And if it's an iPhone, it was created in Taiwan or China. Foxconn created it, but you use AT&T or Sprint or Verizon as your communications network. Right?
But aren't they making sure, I didn't mean to interrupt, but aren't they making sure we have the security? Don't they do the due diligence, AT&T and all of them?
Yes, that's exactly the point. So once Foxconn develops that phone and Apple sells it to AT&T, AT&T does its own certification of that device to make sure it's secure, and then they apply their network connectivity to that device. So it's all contained within the AT&T network infrastructure, which is regulated by the government. And so there are rules of privacy and minimal security practices that they need to comply with for the purpose of keeping their users safe and secure. What's happening in IoT is you're using a unknown platform in a foreign country to do what AT&T is doing in the analogy of
But
your
how
iPhone.
do you know when? Is it like any product that doesn't have, years ago we had the good housekeeping, I'm dating myself, good housekeeping seal of approval. Is that what you're saying we now need in this one? I'm going to start this. This should be my thing. Here we do at the Peggy Smedley Show. It's the IoT seal of approval on those products.
Yes. I mean, so our version of that is powered by Pepper. So if there's a powered by Pepper logo on your box, you'll know as a consumer that that's a US-based company managing and protecting your information.
So every one of yours is going to say powered by Pepper.
Yeah, our goal is that the manufacturers that use us and distribute devices that work on our platform is to somehow describe their platform as being Pepper or some US-based platform. And I think the government ought to regulate this, and it's not complex. It's simply don't allow a device that's being sold in the United States to communicate offshore, right? Use onshore, US-based platforms to control those communications. And storing data at a US instance of AWS is not enough. And that's
but
the level
yours is the platform, but you have a benefit from that being the platform. So where is the separation of church and state if you're providing the platform and you're saying it's powered by Pepper, you're providing the platform. So somebody listening says, well, they've got something to gain. Is there, we talk about church and state there. Is there, someone was watching right now and listening to this saying, how do I see powered by Pepper meaning it's independent?
Yeah, I was being a little bit facetious with that because I really don't expect Pepper to be the de facto platform in the United States. There are plenty of very good...
There's a lot of platforms right now, and everybody wants a piece of the pie, whether it's Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, right, Zigbee, whatever. Everybody wants to be the de facto standard, and we don't have any, which is the problem in the home.
Yeah, self-promotion aside, I think what should happen is the government ought to say, as I described, devices that you buy in the United States need to be powered by an IoT communications platform owned and operated in the United States. And they're compelled to keep the data within the geographical boundaries and comply with certain rules that protect the consumer from data breach or cybersecurity breach of their device.
So are you essentially then competing in some ways with what would be a Zigbee, a Bluetooth, or all of those? Do you find yourself coming up against them on the consumer side of things?
No, we'll enable Zigbee, Bluetooth, anything. So our platform is technology agnostic. So think of us as the AT&T, the service provider. So we don't care what kind of technology exists. We enable it for the end user. Our customers are manufacturers. So manufacturers use our platform, and then we deploy those services from the devices our manufacturer partners create into their user bases.
How has the market been right now? Is being receptive to how everything's happening right now? Because the market is changing. More products are coming. How have they been to embrace Pepper IoT? What have you found right now with manufacturing?
Well, we have an active business development effort in China, directly with manufacturers. And what we've learned is that the reason so many devices are being managed on top of for example, Chinese IoT platforms is because they served a need. And that need was tied to the crazy demand by consumers here who needed the next camera, the next smart plug, the next device. And retailers are compelled to go source that and do it. And so those manufacturers didn't have an option other than look to what's around them in terms of platforms. And so that's sort of perpetuated itself into, frankly, a brand new industry in China and some other countries that are in the IoT communications business. So they're doing, there's some reports that exist in the marketplace that have done penetration tests on some of these devices, and there's some despicable activity occurring. Much of the data and certain devices are going to China and then being tracked to ad brokerage houses. So meaning that these platforms are actually monetizing their business by selling user data to these obscure ad platforms, in other countries. So that's got to stop. That's just not right. So yes, I think policymakers need to begin to create a regulatory environment around IoT, because the data. Think about for a second Huawei and ZTE and how the government has restricted their involvement inside of our telecommunications networks, right? And so if you think about the presence of Huawei in a base station and a cell tower, they'd have access to some percentage of telecommunications in the United States. There's 300 million cell phones or phone lines in the United States, something like that, around that number. That's a really critical homeland security issue for them to have that access to those number of devices in the marketplace. Switch to IoT for a second. There will be a multiple number of nodes or endpoints or devices in the marketplace than what Huawei could affect. So the true issue here is that this could become a real sort of Spygate scenario where there are hundreds and hundreds of millions, if not billions, of consumer-grade connected devices in our households in the United States that are sending information to these foreign entities. So
couldn't that be every appliance we have, all the things we're talking about? I mean, is that what you're essentially?
It wouldn't be every. It's.
But I mean, those are things we're talking about. I mean, that's what you're addressing.
Things, yeah.
Everyday things.
Absolutely.
I mean, we're talking connected home galore here right now.
Yeah.
I mean,
and when you see a light bulb in a store that's an LED light bulb that's $10, think twice, because remember that light bulb has a life to it, right? So, and now the LED lights are what, 20 years? They last for 20 years. Well, you have to have an infrastructure to support the connectivity of that light bulb for that 20-year period. There's no way a retail price of $10 can support the requirement that is necessary for that device to be connected to the internet and be updated and patched and managed over a 20-year period of time. So cheap is not good. I would think twice as a consumer before I buy that super cheap device, because there's a bunch of shortcuts taken and they're not thinking about the life and the necessary maintenance that has to occur.
We have a society, we can't get Republicans and Democrats to get along on some of the simplest things in some cases. How are they going to agree on something to regulate something so complicated as the IoT?
Well, I think if you break it down, it's not that complicated, right? If you think about the everyday communications that are occurring inside of our homes being sent to a foreign entity, that is a huge stopgap, right? So if Congress can think about just the implications of that, just in terms of protection of consumer privacy, not to mention potentially weapons of war in the future and things like that are crazy to think about, this is an easy one for them to come to terms on and regulate. Just stop the transmission of data, unknowingly going to these foreign markets.
But we've been talking about what if our infrastructure gets hacked, our smart grid. They can't seem to comprehend that at this point. So when we talk about these connected appliances, we talk about light bulbs, any of these connected home products, and they're still not getting it, what's it going to take? Some major event that really is catastrophic before our governmental officials get it, before they really do something?
Well, let's take a step before the government. And my belief is that the distributors of these products need to take responsibility. So I believe they are complicit in distributing, I think this holiday season I read somewhere 30 million IoT connected devices, into our, households are being sold. Those distributors, the major retailers and online players are enabling that. Right? They're enabling that distribution. They need to do more due diligence when they're sourcing these devices to really understand what needs to occur to protect their customer from breach.
But aren't we as the consumer to blame, because we want these solutions faster? We're the ones that say we want before and we want them at a price that we want, and we want our investments on the stock market to be so high. We are pushing the demand for these things. It's not sometimes the other way around. It's the chicken and the egg scenario, is it not?
Yeah, it is. And I think we're in this position as a result of what you just described. And it was the insatiable demand for these devices that's caused this situation. But we need to pause, right? It's harmful to us as citizens. It's harmful to us as a nation, and we need to really understand what damage it can cause and quit enabling these foreign markets to have access to our homes.
When we look at this and we're so tenacious about what we desire, do we sometimes have to say, look, when we look at the bigger picture and we say it's really cool to see these things, but is it better to make sure they're safe and we're safe than to and take pause, as you just described, and a year later get them, because we're not just seeking the latest and greatest, to make sure that our connected roads are safe, that our connected homes are safe? If we take that extra pause and we say we do the right things in the due diligence, is that maybe the better path to go?
The consumer?
Yeah, as a consumer, instead of pushing our technology companies to want to put these things out before they're ready.
I'd say yes, with consumers like you and me.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We are aware enough and understand what's at risk enough to do that. But I've stopped trying to understand the aggregate population. With I have teenage sons, and if I were to ask them, they would say they care less about data privacy. Right? Everybody has it anyway, and it's
do they even read? Do they even read their privacy statements?
No,
right?
I don't. I mean, and
they're
these
too
things
long.
they're too long, and many of them are being breached anyway, and so there's no enforcement around it. But I would hope the conscientious consumer would look at these devices and say, wow, how does this thing work, and what are my risks, and make a responsible choice. I don't think we can expect consumers to do that. I think the responsibility lies with the distributors of the devices, and if they're not compliant, then the government needs to step in and regulate it so they are compliant.
Tell us where we're looking to see what's in the future for Pepper IoT in 2019.
So when you walk into mass market retail, you will find devices that leverage our platform to distribute elegant services. Today, they are largely camera products, Wi-Fi connected camera products, and they're largely in mass market retail. We'll be expanding very dramatically in 2019 to add non-camera devices to our platform, and we will have service provider deployments. So these will be the services that a utility or a telecom carrier will launch under their own brand, using our platform with a variety of devices that they can suggest to sell into their user base, and be at the center of the connected life of their users. So we will see exponential growth in 2019. If in the event that this regulation occurs or responsibility is taken by distributors in cleaning up the marketplace, our business will really expand, because the manufacturers in China that we're talking to will need a quick solution to maintain their distribution in the United States, and we're ready to take that on.
Well, Scott Ford, CEO of Pepper IoT, thank you for being with us. We enjoyed your time. Tell us where our listeners can go to get more information on what you're doing.
So our platform is, the website is pepper.me. That gives you a quick description of what we do, and look for products like Momentum and Swan in some of these retail locations, and announcing some new ones soon.
All right. All right, we are coming to you live from CES 2019 here in Las Vegas, and as you can hear behind us, there's been a lot going on, but we're going to take a quick break. Stick around. We've got more to come right after this break, right from CES.